Hey everybody, I'm DJ Sixsmith. You're watching The Sit Down. Look who's back. It's Alex Wolff. A lot going on these days. What's up, man? How are you?
How you doing, man?
It's good to talk to you. It's a weird time right now.
We're doing the best we can in circumstances.
I know. It's a pretty wild time, but at least a lot of time to watch your movies right now, right?
Honestly, it's one of the amazing silver linings. I'm watching like 10 times as many movies as I was before. I'm watching like sometimes 2 movies a day.
What are some good ones that you've been watching recently?
Well, I kind of said this to people already, so I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but I've seen most of the Birdman Collection, and I've been rewatching like all of them and just kind of enjoying like watching, kind of going through and studying them and having a lot of fun watching them. So, I mean, I'm trying to watch stuff that's weighty and stuff that is kind of thrilling, because I feel like during this time watching mindless entertainment weirdly makes my mind wander during this Corona time, because there's just so much going on in the world. So when I watch something that's intense and I watch something that's, emotionally thick, it kind of distracts me from what's going on, and I kind of need that.
Well, I think Castle in the Ground kind of falls in that category. So what do you remember about doing that one? And, what was the biggest learning lesson you took away?
From doing it or from watching it?
Either or. Why don't we start with doing it?
I mean, the weirdest thing is I learned a lot about my body. I learned a lot about what I could withstand. It was one of these movies where I dropped a ton of weight for it, and we were out in the freezing cold in Canada, and I was in every single scene, and it was a really intense movie. So I was working, these really long days without eating, without anything. It was almost like I was on it was almost like I was like running on gas or something, like just a tank of gas. There wasn't anything else. So I kind of learned a lot about me and my abilities as just a person, like what I'm physically capable of, and that I'm capable of a lot more than I thought. And I was kind of pushing my boundaries every day of what I could do and what was possible. And so I guess that was my biggest learning lesson in terms of just like, it actually changed the way I view my body. And I had a lot of health issues afterwards from losing so much weight. And I after that kind of learned a lot about taking care of my body afterwards and figuring out how to do it in a better way. But then emotionally, what I really learned was a lot about what the effects of these drugs are doing to people across the world, and how kind of putting myself in these situations where I was taking these drugs on camera, it kind of magnified how far away I am from the world of addiction in some ways, and how I can't even imagine it with myself. And so how intense it is that when you start doing it, you realize like it's such it's weird. I'm almost like getting emotional talking about it. I mean, it's such a visceral intense thing, like snorting these things up in your body. And I guess I realized how grim of a world it is, and how it's really intense. It's not something that should be ignored, or I think we should be talking about it all the time. It's not some casual thing. It's not a choice. It becomes a disease, and I think it's just worth talking about. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but learning, there's so much you learn from something like this.
It's a really pervasive problem, and it can affect anybody. And I think the weight loss thing is really interesting. How much weight did you end up losing for the movie?
I mean, I tried not to, I didn't want to get too crazy about calculating, but I lost probably about 30.
Wow.
By the time we were shooting, about 30 pounds. Yeah.
That must have been like probably the most intense physical situation, because you've had some really grueling mental parts that you played in the past, but like the combination of the opioid crisis and the physical stuff, and it being freezing cold in Canada, that's nuts, man.
Tell me about it, man. Tell me about it. That's how I felt. I mean, yeah, I've had some emotionally grueling things, but this is definitely physically, nothing comes close to this. It was like, yeah, that's why I'm kind of like, I'm like begging people to see it. I'm like, please, because we worked so hard. It's not just me. Imogen went through a crazy process of her learning about addiction, and she had her own crazy diet she was doing, addict diet, and you know, Joey, the director, went through he went through so much hell to try and make this movie out in Canada in the freezing cold on a low budget. And I just feel like this was I almost want to call it like this was a crime of passion. Like this was we just really had to go for it. There's a lot of inspiration in this movie. It wasn't all inspiration.
Yeah, and then you throw Neve Campbell in there, and you start dealing with terminal illness and grief and trauma.
Yeah, Neve did a whole diet, and it was crazy.
So when people do check this out, what are some big things outside of the opioid addiction? What are some big things you want people to be thinking about when they watch?
Yeah, that's cool, because I think I don't want people to see this movie as an issue movie. You know, it's not that minimizes it a little bit. I feel like that is not exactly what it is. I think the movie is a really personal story about a vulnerable young man and what happens. How do young men deal with grief? And I think it shows that they just want to take the pain away any way they can. And some people it's friendship, some people it's, I don't know, alcohol, some people's it's like getting really in shape. There's a lot of kind of different ways of like coping with grief, but I mean, I just don't want to be reductive to the movie and make it seem like it's too much of like a statement on the opioid crisis. This is a movie about a particular specific young man and his reaction to the loss of his mother, and how he kind of accidentally falls into this world of the drug crisis, and he's he's really followed around by it. She's Imogen is his neighbor. He's been giving his mom these drugs, and that's how a lot of times this kind of stuff starts, is that you'll maybe be taking care of a loved one, or someone will have drugs in the house because of something else, and then he just kind of starts taking it just to numb the pain, because it's so I guess what I want people to take from it is, especially in this time, that loneliness and isolation and things, this is like the worst case scenario of how you can cope with it. And I for me, always through darkness there's light. And so for me, it's like when I see a movie that's about a character struggling or something, sometimes I can find a lot of catharsis in that, and I can find a lot of light in that. So I hope people can, if they're feeling lonely or they're feeling isolated, watching a movie about a young boy making all the wrong decisions, it can be kind of good to see how bad it can go. And see how even a sweet young boy can get wrapped up in this kind of a problem, that they're not alone. You know, it's not just, we can't just ship all the people who do these drugs off on some bad people island. You know, they're all, usually innocent, vulnerable people. So that's my, soapbox.
There's lots of really interesting topics to explore in that movie, and same is true in Bad Education. I mean, you think about your character, it's like, you publish this story about the superintendent and what this other woman is doing with the money, and then it's like, you're an English teacher your whole life, you become a superintendent, you get this power and greed. So what was it like unpacking some of the big topics in that one?
Yeah, it's funny because that movie was the easiest and most fun thing I've ever done. Like it would just felt like summer camp or something, because I had like a week or two of filming, and I just got to go and hang out with Geraldine Viswanathan. I call her Viswanathan, but it was just like the most fun thing doing that movie. And I love Corey. He's just become one of my best friends. So and by the way, I had a lot of fun on Castle and Ground. It was really hard, but I had a ton of fun on it too. It was like one of those mixed experiences that felt exhilarating and fun. And I got close with the crew and close with the director and close with Imogen and Neve. And it was beautiful, but it was different. It was much harder. Bad Education almost felt like candy.